Welcome to the World Nomads Podcast, delivered by World Nomads, the travel lifestyle and insurance brand. It's not your usual travel podcast. It's everything for the adventurous, independent traveler.
Hey, welcome to the episode of the podcast where we delve into the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania. All the A's. Look, I have to admit, I knew next to nothing about these places before I started research for this episode, not even where they are geographically. I'd assumed they were in Eastern Europe along with those other former Soviet satellites, but not so, Phil.
No, indeed. No, they're in Northern Europe, below the Scandinavian nations, with Russia to the east and Poland in the south. Strictly speaking, Germany and Poland are also Baltic states because they have large sea borders with the Baltic. But historically, Estonia in the north, Latvia in the middle, and Lithuania in the south have been lumped together. Estonia and Latvia became wealthy nations in the past because their ports in Tallinn and Riga remain mostly ice-free in winter, so that gives trade access across the Baltic. And in medieval times, Lithuania had a huge empire that stretched as far as the Black Sea and out across to Moscow. But of course, with such strong neighbours around them, they've been a punching bag in the rise and fall of empires. For the past couple of 100 years, they've been largely closed to the rest of the world because of occupation and oppression by the Russian Tsars, then the Soviets, Josef Stalin, then Hitler's Nazis, and then Joe Stalin again at the end.
Going back for another go.
Yeah, modern Europeans know a little about them, but mostly because Tallinn and Riga became popular with stag parties back in the 80s.
Oh, and it's those things which have conspired to keep the Baltics off the travel radar. They do have a bit of a reputation for Soviet grimness, a cheap drinking spot for bucks parties, and women dancing in peasant dresses.
I know, yeah, the traditional dress is very popular, yeah. That's all true, but as we're about to learn, there's a lot about these three separate nations, which make them an ideal location for the independent adventure traveller.
Yeah, but we will touch on that dark side when we chat with Jessie about the KGB Museum. Kate will share 5 things she wishes she knew before going to Latvia with her partner Mark. Award-winning travel writer Rob McFarlane joins us to chat about the holiday blues. Now that the festive season is over, I know you do. But let's kick off with Amy, who had a date with the devil in Lithuania.
So one thing I've learned about you is that wherever you travel, you like to do it on a bike. So why did you have a date with the devil in Lithuania on a bike?
I don't know. I mean, it just happened, can I say? Doesn't that always go with dates? It kind of just happens. I don't know. I mean, I like bikes. I think cycling is a really good way to see places. It's slower, much slower, than driving, obviously. But a little bit faster than walking. So it's kind of a midway for me. And it just happens that the devil was there.
So for those listening, let's explain who the devil is.
Well, so in Lithuania, there is a place called, the Coronian Spit, which is essentially a massive sandbank that runs along the coast of Lithuania. And on there's always been this legend of a giant lady who protected the coast by pouring sand over this spit. And of course, with all these legends, there's always the bad people. So there's witches that roams the forest of Lithuania, and as all dark creatures go, the devil's apparently their boss. So what they've created is this a forest of legends, you could say, or forest of folklore, where local artists have carved out wooden sculptures that tells the stories of these folklore. So it's not just the folklore of this particular giantess, but it's also, all the witches that live there and all these other stories to do with the land surrounding it. And they, for some reason, included Lucifer, who is the devil, of course, and for those who didn't know. And also his gate to hell. So he's pretty much sitting there in front of his gate. And apparently if you go and kiss him, you could potentially win the witch's beauty contest. So why not?
So you kissed Lucifer. How do you know that you've won? I mean, this is all folklore. How do you know that you've won the witch's beauty contest?
I don't know. I'm still waiting for the paparazzi to come through and,
That particular area, the Coronian Spit, that's UNESCO World Heritage. Is that based on the fact that it's full of this folklore, or because of the sand itself or the sculptures that the artists have done?
No, so the UNESCO World Heritage status have nothing to do with the boat laws. The UNESCO Heritage status has to do with the actual nature setting of the sandbank. So it's actually quite so for a sandbank to stretch this long, it's a natural phenomenon, and they wanted to protect it. And what it does is this sandbank has various different sand qualities, which, unfortunately to my little mind, I can't really grasp the difference between it's a grey sand and a white sand. And, there's also brown sand, and there's apparently 5 shades of sand, which I'm sure a geologist will be happy to explain it to all of us one day. But this unique ecosystem then supports a lot of the local wildlife, which are a lot different to the other wildlife that we can see. So, we're talking about little creatures that you normally wouldn't, expect to live in sand, and also the vegetation that can grow on the sand holds the sand together and essentially protects the coast of Lithuania from more sand being entered into their mainland. So it is actually, this sandbank is in fact protecting the coast of Lithuania, whether that's the work of the giantess or, actually just nature doing its job. It's for many to decide.
How'd you find yourself there then, riding a bike? You end up on a giant sandbank.
So because I'm a cyclist and a lot of my holidays are going to be, the first thing I think about is, can I cycle there? And so I naturally look at all these cycle routes that are accessible and, that I can do without too much effort, obviously, along the Baltic the Balkan coast, the Baltic coast. It's quite flat, and places like, so we're talking about Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania, it's joined by an entire route of this Eurovelo cycling route. And it just happened that I live in London at the moment. So I saw they were starting a direct flight from London to Palanga, which is the closest airport to Klaipeda. And it was a place I've never been to. So I thought, hey, why not? I'll go and have a look what's there and hire a bike and see if I like it. And if I do, I might go back. And it's one of those places that you don't really, it's not like Paris or, it's not really a bucket list place. It's one of those places you just have to stumble upon. And it just happens that I was looking at various different cycling routes and stumbled upon this one.
They're the best places though, those sort of what we call off the beaten track.
Yeah, exactly. And, you go there without an expectation. You're not, obviously, people go, oh, I want to go to Rome and Paris. I want to do, I want to see this, great things. This is more like, oh, I'll just go and see what's there. It's not, yeah. And I think the best experiences that come out of these kind of experiences, or come out of these trips is because you learn things that you wouldn't normally learn, or you experience things that you normally wouldn't even expect to be there. So no, it's great.
Thanks, Amy. And as with everything and everyone you hear in the episode, more information, stories, etc. are available in show notes.
Speaking of learning things, Kate and her partner Mark join us now to tell us about the 5 things she wishes she knew before going to Latvia.
Thanks for having us again.
Always a pleasure.
Now, did Mark help you with this particular article?
Look, I'm going to say yes.
Because he's there listening.
And there was actually, we were going to write about 6 things, was the fact that I could actually find where Latvia was. That was number 6. Where is it?
Yeah, well, that's a point. I mean, it's not a huge place for a start, so it is a little bit hard to pinpoint
it's
on the map.
It's not where I thought it was.
I know, is that right?
It's not. So Mark, you tell, what have you learned? Where is it?
It's in Northern Europe. It's nestled between Estonia, Lithuania, and it's sort of basically the fence to Russia.
Yeah, see, I thought it was further down, like come down toward Croatia. That's where I thought it was. How embarrassing is that?
Wait a minute, Croatia?
Don't. Sorry, don't. Can we edit that bit?
You're like a whole continent away.
I know.
Someone's very lost.
I don't look.
Kate said to me, she said, let's go to Nicaragua. And I said, I've never been to Africa.
Look, We like to think we're worldly, but occasionally we get it wrong. So, Kate, what 5 things did you wish you knew before you and Mark got there to Latvia?
Well, hopefully it was a pleasant surprise, right?
Yeah, you'd hope so.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely was. No, I tell you what, one thing we were really, really surprised about Latvia was how beautiful it is. You know, I'm going to be honest, we knew nothing about it before we went. We were actually talking this morning about it. We were trying to work out why we went. We couldn't work out why we went. But when we got there, we were really, really surprised. I mean, it was just one of those situations where you're driving from the airport and you sort of go, wow, this is beautiful, you know, and we weren't expecting it.
No, we were expecting more Russian, Soviet Union style,
yeah,
a little bit drab. But it wasn't.
A lot like what you see in some Eastern European countries. But, you know, beautiful cities, just stunning, and the countryside.
Is it all like birch trees and stuff like that?
It's kind of, well, I suppose because it is so close to Scandinavia, but it is really a lot like what we've seen in Scandinavia, those beautiful wooded forests, a lot like what we saw in Russia as well. You know, really dense forests, just, you know, gorgeous beaches.
And the forest, when you see the greens of the forest, it's as though they've been oversaturated. It's that green.
Wow.
Yeah.
Put through a filter almost.
Yeah.
God, Instagram business.
Yeah. But hang on. You talk about beaches. You just mentioned beaches then. I wasn't expecting, you know, there to be decent beaches in Latvia.
No, and it's something that, I mean, we've found this in other places as well, that you just don't think about that. You know, when you say, oh, well, we're going to go to the Baltics, beaches don't come to the forefront of your mind, you know. So that kind of thing is really surprising when you get there and you sort of go, well, okay, the water's a little chilly, especially by our standards, but pristine, absolutely pristine. And I suppose you've got a country or a group of countries that essentially were closed for such a long time that, you know, they're still largely untapped.
We mentioned at the top of the podcast, we sort of asked ourselves a few questions. Why would a nomad want to go to Latvia? And there are plenty of reasons, but there are some really weird, not statistics, but little fun facts. Like, I didn't realise there's a Latvian link to jeans.
Levi's.
Yeah, they were invented by
Levi Strauss was Latvian.
No, they were invented by a Latvian tailor, but funded by Levi Strauss.
Oh,
so
okay.
the Latvian tailor, he's got nothing out of it.
Nothing.
Levi gets the name.
And we could have all been wearing Krupnikuses instead of Levi's, I don't know.
So
By the way, I'm sorry, I have to confess, Krupnikas is actually a Lithuanian drink.
Oh, okay.
It was the only kind of Baltic-sounding word that I remembered.
You guys knew about the jeans then, did you?
Funnily enough, I knew about that, but I don't know why I knew that one.
I told you.
Probably. I'll tell you another fun fact about Latvia, which we found while we were there. Organ transplants came from Latvia.
Okay, what's the history behind that?
In Riga, there's this really unusual museum there, and they have this stuffed dog on display that has another dog grafted onto the back of it, and that was the research that started organ transplants.
Why do you ask? 2 dogs.
Exactly.
See, I'm trying to keep a really straight face while I'm telling you this story, but it is actually true.
I just saw you throwing a bucket of water over them.
I thought it was 2 dogs humping. So we had to get up really close to go, oh, no, they're actually connected.
So, come on, Kate, what did you learn? What's the connection between 2 dogs in a humping position got to do with organ transplants?
Well, you know, the thing is that the dog on top didn't have a body.
Okay, this has got really weird now.
I think you've been drinking that drink.
Krupnikas, yeah, there you go.
Krupnikas, too many of them.
So there you go. There's a fun fact for you to have a look.
It's true. The dog on top, it's just like his head and his little paws, and they're connected to the neck of the other dog.
So, yeah, these are really unusual things that have been happening in Latvia before any of us sort of thought about going there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, and just give us a bit about the isolation. So obviously that's a lot to do with, you know, the Soviet era and what have you. And what kind of an effect being isolated like that has had on the place? What's so good about that now?
I think like, we've spent a lot of time in former communist countries, if you like. And I think one thing we noticed about Riga, especially out of all the ones that we've been to, it seems to be a lot more progressive than a lot of other countries that have been closed off for many years, didn't it? It was a lot more, perhaps it's the new generation coming through really making a charge in making a change, if you like. But that was one of the things we noticed, especially as soon as we arrived in Riga, wasn't it? It just seemed to be a lot more progressive, and they seem to have moved forward a lot quicker than some other countries that were closed off.
Compare it then to Estonia, which you both went to.
Yeah, I think the same thing. I think it's a lot more... Look, possibly, and I could be reaching, there could be because they're so close to Scandinavia, so there could be that influence there with those Northern European countries. But similar with Estonia, I think to some respect you'd have to put the 3 Baltic countries in one basket in that way, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
From all of the countries that we've been to that, were essentially closed, due to communism, they seem to be the ones that have sort of moved forward a lot faster.
All right, well, you've created a snapshot. If someone was to ask you, hey, Kate Mark, why should I go to the Baltics or to Latvia, what would you say?
I'd say go in May and go to the beer festival.
Oh, okay. No, now you've got me.
Yeah, thought that'd be a winner.
Yep. Well, is this like, akin to the Oktoberfest thing?
Well, on a much smaller scale and a lot classier.
Well, that wouldn't be hard. Being classier.
We were so lucky. We rock up to Riga. We don't even know where we are. We're wandering around, and here's this sign says, beer festival, €2. Oh. So off we go. And all it is it's in a big park. It was a beautiful day. And there's these big barbecues. They're doing big skewers of meat and seafood. And next to the barbecue is beer. So it went beer, barbecue, beer, barbecue, beer. And at each end were bands or DJs.
That's fantastic. But they are an incredible selection of, craft beers and things like that, which, again, we kind of weren't expecting. It was pretty cool, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it's held in the Vermonese Gardens. They're dating back to about the 19th century. How's that for some history?
Yeah, I was doubting you as you were saying that.
I made it up. But anyway, if you go to Old Town Riga, the park up the road has the barbecue.
There's a beer festival.
Follow your nose and your tongue.
There you go. And speaking of, because you write about the food as well in the article, so you were surprised by that. You're saying lots of good barbecue stuff.
Yum.
Yeah, the food's amazing. Absolutely. They've got one of the things we really loved in Riga was the marketplace, because it's in a huge Zeppelin hangar. Now, I had to really rack my brain to go, Zeppelins, aren't they, those giant balloons? But, yeah, a series of Zeppelin hangars. And in there they've got the usual day-to-day market, but they have all these little stalls and restaurants and things, so you can just go and choose fresh fish and, have lunch there. And the food is just outstanding.
And then, if you're like Kate, you can go and try, and they're quite famous for this, is their rye breads.
Okay.
You write about that in the article too, don't you?
Oh, I love rye bread, and the darker the better. I was in heaven.
Well, you haven't convinced me on the dogs and how it's kind of hooks into organ transplant, but you have convinced me on Latvia. Guys, you're such fun to chat to. Thank you so much.
Great talking to you guys.
Thanks for having us again.
Look, a warning, there will be a pic of that dog the guys were talking about in show notes, along with links to their vlog, Vagrants of the World. I know you laugh, but it's actually quite serious, isn't it?
It is.
And why...
Should we put the YouTube video?
No.
That's horrific.
You can go and find that yourself,
Righto.
people. But tell me how, because I was still trying to struggle on how it deals with organ transplant, but you said it's got to do with connecting all the...
Yeah, they need to be able to prove that you can connect one entity's veins and circulatory system to another animals or beings.
Yeah.
And you need to practice doing the surgery on something, I suppose. You can't really start on people.
Normally it's mice, but why not dogs?
I know. But look, this is, it's historical as well. I'm not quite sure you'd be able to get away with it these days.
Oh, it's like a 1950s B-grade sci-fi movie, if anyone's familiar with those.
The human fly, remember?
Fly!
Yeah.
The fly! What news have you got for us?
All right. The 92-year-old Queen of England has been travelling to the four corners of her once glorious empire since she was 21. She's visited 120 different countries, many more than once, but it's been revealed in a new book she dislikes air travel. Not quite a fear of travelling, but she says she doesn't enjoy it. Now, as far as I can tell, she travels first class. I wonder what she'd think if she bung back in cattle class with the rest of us.
We got something coming up on that too later in the episode.
USA Today travel writer Rick Seeney has named what he calls the 5 travel fails that will ruin your trip or cost you money. Not taking into account possible airport delays. Yeah, especially in the United States, those queues to get through the TSA sometimes you need more than 3 hours to get through those. Failure to weigh your own luggage. Turning up with an overweight bag and having to wear all your clothes or ditch stuff.
Or pay out literally hundreds.
Yep. Failure to screen your own luggage. So that's, liquids and the other so-called contraband that you might have got tucked away in there, which is going to get you pulled out of the queue. Same sort of stuff. Failure to monitor gates and terminals. Yes.
Oh, I think we've all been guilty of that.
Yes, I haven't heard that they've changed gates and terminals. Yeah. And a failure to mind your own personal space. That's, when the bare feet get stuck through the gap in the seat from behind you, and you've got somebody's smelly feet sticking in your personal space. Or
hey, you can buy a sling now
for
the seat in front of you, so that you can rest your feet, and it doesn't sort of interfere with the person in front of you.
Until they put their seat back in.
Until they put that, it does mention that.
And your knees go through your nose.
Yeah. Okay, it did mention that. It was a pros and cons article.
Oh, fair enough. A survey of American teachers reveals 74% of them believe travelling as a child makes you more successful in life. So if you're thinking of packing away the backpack when you start a family, the good news is you can satisfy your wanderlust and pretend you're doing it for the kids. So keep going, all right? Hey, do you take a camera with you when you travel, or do you rely on the phone?
I used to. I do have a digital SLR, but now I just rely on my iPhone. It's good
because
enough.
The DSLR is too big and bulky to carry around. All right. Compact travel cameras are making a bit of a comeback. And Nikon has just released its latest version, the Coolpix A1000. Coolpix, I think that's a cheap sounding name. But anyway, apparently they're good cameras. Look, camera specs don't mean much to me, but it does have a 35 times optical zoom and a 3-inch touch screen that folds out so you can get a nice clear view of what you're taking a photo of. So it's easy to use, and you get a little bit more control over, ISO and all that sort of stuff, so you can turn up some truly Instagram-worthy photographs that will make all your friends jealous.
Yeah, all right. So not only did I not know where the Baltics were, I don't even know what ISO is, which is why none of my pics on my digital SLR come out any good.
The depth of your troubles.
Yeah, I know. Is that it?
That's it. I'm done.
Awesome. Well, we are obviously back into the swing of things with the festive season behind us, and it's often tough and depressing when reality hits. I know. You've been struggling. I heard travel writer Rob McFarlane speaking about the holiday blues on another travel podcast called Flight of Fancy, and decided we needed to chat. Rob, are the holiday blues a real thing?
Absolutely. I think if you think about travel and holidays, it's something that you spend a lot of time planning and researching, and you spend a lot of time looking forward to it. You can spend months and months sort of anticipating this trip. And so, and I think a lot of the appreciation of travel is that anticipation before you go somewhere, and then you go, and then you come back, and then it's all over, and you're broke, and you're back to your normal routine, and you're back to work. So it's something that I experience multiple times a year.
Yeah, well, we'll get to exactly how you live, but yesterday was the first time in the office for Phil and I. Phil, you were only gone for 2 weeks, but you'd forgotten how everything worked.
Yeah, I'm reconnecting all those neurons, which buttons to push on this podcast panel we got here. But the greatest thing, of course, was I forgot all my passwords. I couldn't get into anything. So I had to get the IT guy down to come and help me reset everything. But I got going again. But it's neural pathways, isn't it, Rob?
Absolutely. Excuse me. Yeah, on all sorts of levels, isn't it? It's sort of readjusting to new routines, and you have this sort of delicious freedom when you're traveling, and you don't have to be places at certain times, and your days sort of unfold somewhat spontaneously. And so you leave that and you go back to this very rigid sort of structured life that you have back at home. And it's tough. It's tough readjusting.
It's weird, though, with seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, that's actually been psychologically diagnosed, but the holiday blues is yet to be. At this point, it's just something that's anecdotal.
Oh, totally. And I think, as someone who grew up in the UK, who I think was permanently affected by SAD for the first sort of 28 years of my life, I can totally appreciate that. And one of the big reasons that I moved to Australia was just for sunshine and being able to own more than 2 pairs of shorts and all the things that sort of put a smile on your face when you get up in the morning. But I think the exact same thing happens with travel. When you come back from a trip, you've often been somewhere nice and tropical, and you come back and it's just the drudgery of everyday life. But it's also really, I'm sure we'll get onto this, but I think it's totally necessary. You absolutely need those breaks and those doses of normality so that you then appreciate the next bit of travel that you do. And when I do trips in very quick succession, then I often don't enjoy them as much as if I've had a little bit of a break and I've had a bit of normality, and then I get that excitement when I head back to the airport.
Well, that's one of the things that always bemuses me as well. And you're somebody who does a lot of travel, but there is so much emphasis put on the experience of travel itself, like, airline travel and what have you. But in the end, it's just a big bus in the sky, really. And the travel is not about the conveyance that gets you there. It's about where you're going to.
Oh, absolutely. Unfortunately, because of our sort of geographical positioning, then we often have to spend a lot of time in those big buses in the sky just to sort of get anywhere. And so I think airline travel has a sort of a resonance in Australia that it just doesn't have in other parts of the world, because, when you talk to Americans and you talked about the fact that we have to sit on a plane for 14 or 15 hours to get there, they just can't get their heads around that, because within America, you can only fly 4 or 5 different hours. So
I love it. For me, heading to the airport, the beer that you can have at 7 o'clock in the morning without being judged, the anticipation of getting on the plane, and the excitement of picking your meal or what you might watch, and then the destination. For me, that's part of the fun. I really do enjoy that. But on the return, it's, as you said, Rob, with Australians, we're travelling 14, 15 hours. It's so depressing. It's
grueling, isn't it? Yeah, unless you've turned left when you got on the plane and you're sitting in one of those very nice seats up the front, then when you're stuck in the sort of cattle class with everyone else, then it's tough.
A friend of mine took his wife to the United States for a significant anniversary number, and splurged out on business class seats, talking about turning left. And so his wife, she settled in and had a very nice time and made sure she got some sleep for where they arrived. But for my friend, he said, this is probably only going to happen to me once in my life. So he stayed up all night, ordering all the different foods.
Exactly. And that is the reason that airlines don't upgrade economy people. So often, they've often got spare seats in business and premium economy, but they know if they upgrade economy passenger, they will be harder wearing than any business passenger will, because they're going to want to try everything and eat everything and watch every movie. And so the few odd times that I've got to travel business, it's been quite interesting, because particularly on overnight flights, you'll find that all the business people, they will have dinner in the lounge beforehand, and they get on a flight, like this is from New York to London, and they just sleep. So their whole point is they need to get 5 hours sleep so that they can hit the ground running. I was the sole light in business class for that entire trip. There was just this one spotlight coming down when I was eating, getting another Baileys, and yes, I'll have that ice cream.
Exactly.
So tell us, Rob, about you. You've sorted life by the sounds of it. You do half in Australia, half in the UK and Europe?
Yeah, so essentially I leave Australia around May each year, and then I do about a month of travel in the US, and then I do 3 months in Europe, and then I'll do another month in the US in sort of September time, and then I'll get back to Australia in October. And part of that is actually that issue that we talked about earlier, which is that I'm a freelance travel writer, and so to get flight support's really difficult, particularly from Australia. So if I want to do a trip in Europe, then for someone to fly me there from Australia, it's very expensive, but to get me there from London with all the various cheap European airlines is much cheaper. And so it's better for me to be based in Europe for that time, and then I can do stories around there. And similarly for the US, once I'm in the US, it's easy to get around.
Okay, seasonal affective disorder. Are we going to make up, what are we going to, travel return disorder?
Oh, yeah, we need an acronym.
Yeah, there we go.
That'll do.
Yeah, we need a TLA. That's right.
Okay, so any tips then on recovering from, what are we calling it? TLA?
TLD.
TLD. Any tips then, Rob, from you first?
Yeah, I mean, there is a few. One is to try and apply that same, I guess, appreciation and curiosity to your home as you do when you travel. But I think the biggest thing, certainly the biggest strategy for me, is just acceptance. You have to accept that down that you hit, that sort of, coming back down the roller coaster after your trip, is just a very necessary part of travel. And that is what gives you the comparison to get excited about again when you then go and book your next trip.
Phil, what do you do? And I've seen you at work. You haven't convinced me that you've got any tips yet.
I just, rage around swearing and smashing things. No, my wife has the technique down pat. She says you always have another trip that you must be looking forward to. So one of the first things she does when we get back, or even sometimes she arranges it whilst we're still away, she books the next one.
I like that. Well, for me, one thing that I like to do is to obviously think about the next trip, but to come home, and I'm a big fan of the Snapfish or Apple books, putting all your photos into something that will arrive in the post that's tangible.
And that's actually a great idea, because so often, particularly nowadays, you go away and you take thousands of photos, and then they just sit there on your laptop, on your computer, and you never look through them again. And so that having that process sort of forces you to go through your photos, whittle them down to the, 30 or 40 that are really good, and then pop them in a book.
So one of the pillars of what World Nomads is that you should share your stories. You should tell your stories as well. Now, I don't want to, make the competition harder for you out there, but do you reckon people should have a go at writing their own travel story, even not for publication, but for themselves, perhaps?
Absolutely, yeah. It's, when you travel knowing that you're going to have to write about it afterwards, you're much more immersed in the destination. You're much more observant. You're much more, as I say, open to experiences, because you think, well, I need to tell this story in 2 weeks' time, whether it's for a publication, or it might just be for a personal blog, or it might just be for an email to your family and friends. And so, you're more observant. You look at the colors, you think about the sounds, you take down those little snatches of conversation, that really, interesting comment made by the taxi driver. And so I think it makes you a better traveler.
There will be a link in show notes to read Rob's stories and more information on his travel writing workshops. I've participated in one. They're fantastic.
Well, we have a new affiliate partner here at World Nomads, Jessie. So it's time now to find out a little more about the Baltics and what Jessie on a Journey is all about.
Yeah, so when I went to college, I thought that I would do nonprofit PR. That was sort of the goal. And then when I studied abroad in lovely Australia, I decided that I just wanted to keep traveling. I became, bitten by the travel bug, as they say. And then I just started doing a lot of research, trying to see what I could do in terms of a travel job. And I saw people just like me with travel blogs, which I had never heard of before. This is like 2011. And I realized, you didn't have to be, Samantha Brown or some celebrity to really write about travel. So I pursued it really aggressively. And when I started it, I really wanted to show women in particular that you didn't need to wait for someone else to travel. I usually travel by myself, even though I'm engaged now. I still usually travel by myself.
We've just finished an episode on women in travel. How do you find traveling the world as a solo female?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's very empowering. When you travel on your own, especially, you really realize what you're capable of. You run into even just little things like, your luggage doesn't get off the plane and you have to figure out how to deal with that. And it's not a big deal. Well, I actually once didn't have my luggage for a week. That was kind of frustrating, but you'll live, it'll be fine. And you figure out how to navigate these little challenges. Or I've missed a train before because I didn't realize they'd said it switched tracks because it was in Italian. And, before going on the trip, I'm like, oh my gosh, what if I miss a train? Well, I stayed an extra night in the place I was in and it was fine. And I just went, onward the next day. And, these things that seem so small aren't as big. I mean, that seem so big aren't as big as they actually may have seemed beforehand. Not to say I've never run into any issues. Like, you definitely need to be aware of your surroundings. And there are, some unique challenges I think that women face that maybe men don't as much. If that kind of makes sense.
Can I just ask you a bit of a curly question about this? Because I also write quite a lot of the articles on the safety blog.
Oh, okay.
And I do. And, part of that is if you go to this destination, then, attitudes towards women, especially women traveling alone, are different to what you expect at home. And the suggestion is that, and everybody makes it, not just me, that women have to change their behaviour. Women have to change their behaviour in that situation.
I think it's tough because it's like in an ideal world, everyone wouldn't treat, everyone would do the right thing, right? So it's tough. I feel like for me, it's just being aware of my surroundings and realizing that there are people who are potentially going to take advantage of me and needing to be aware of that. People, like I've been sexually assaulted, like in a hostel from someone who worked there. Like literally, I asked for something at the front desk and in 2 seconds, I was like pushed against the wall with this guy, like putting his hands up my skirt and like kissing me. And it was the craziest thing because I ran up the stairs. I had actually met like someone else along the way, another guy, like another traveler. He was a guy. And I told him what happened. He went down. It did get a little physical. He, stuck up for me. But the owner of the hostel was called, and the owner asked me like 30 times if I was telling the truth. And it was like the craziest thing because I'm just like, why would I make this up? And also like they asked me so many times that I genuinely started questioning myself. Yeah. And then finally the guy admitted it and he got fired. But I was like, how could you sit there and ask me if I was telling the truth like over and over again?
Ali Al, travel safety writer in the Women in Travel episode, said that they will always normally say or usually say, what did you do?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry, this has ended up going...
I know.
Really, I'm sorry about that. But I really was interested in, because I feel funny writing things like that. I just...
No, it was good and great that you've shared your experience. So, look, the episode is on the Baltics. Did you feel safe in Latvia?
A good segue.
So you did feel safe.
I did. And I was, I heard two things. Some people were like, oh, there's nothing to do there, which was super not true. And this is just for me, Latvia. Like I don't know the whole region very well, but I went to Latvia specifically and, I didn't find that there was nothing to do. And then some of like my older family members were a little like, oh, I don't think it's safe. I feel like there's like the still like historical sort of like connotation that's still with them or something that like my parents think of. So they were like, oh, is it safe? Blah, blah, blah. So when I arrived, I was a little like, all right, maybe I'll stay in tonight and, just stay around the hotel. And then like, the next day I actually went out and explored. I felt completely safe, like, one of the safest places I've ever felt. And then I did tons of day trips out of the city because I based in Riga the whole time. And at no point did I feel unsafe. I felt like the people were nice and friendly. It was very easy to get around. So it was kind of like the perfect destination, I felt like, for a solo traveler.
Well, your parents are right. Your parents are right. It does have a dark past.
And
I still think they think of it now. It's like, oh, is that still, happening? Or
well, on your site, you've got so many articles on Latvia, and one included the KGB Museum. Speaking of dark past, did you like that segue?
Good
that one worked.
That one worked.
So the museum is actually like pretty small and simple, and it's wild like to think about what happened here though. So it's actually, I didn't really talk about it with that many locals, but I was told, like if you talk about it with some people that live there, I think they called it the corner house, people still get kind of like, chills from it because, it has such a dark history. So when you walk through the museum, they have kind of a lot of, I guess you would say giant signs, but not in a boring way. Like the history is so like dark but fascinating. So you really, like, I read everything. So you kind of like go through history in a timeline walking through the museum. And you can see some portraits of people that were kept there because, you know, according to what I read, people were just taken and kept there, and like their families may have not have been notified. So really, really scary history happened in this building that just seems like kind of, you know, quiet and simple today. It's eerie to think about.
Yeah.
Is there anywhere off the beaten track outside of Riga that you can recommend? You said you did a few day trips.
Oh, yeah. So in Latvia, I did actually, Latvia ended up being one of the quirkier trips. So I booked a few tours, and I did work with the tourism board a little bit. So I didn't know all of the logistics until the week before. And I said I love adventure travel. So they set me up with they said it was a jungle hike and a stand-up paddleboarding trip. I'm like, okay. Go there, find out the stand-up paddleboarding. They're picking me up at 3 a.m. I was like, what? I've never gone stand-up paddleboarding at 3 a.m. And then the night hike started, we met in the city center at 9 p.m. to drive to the place. That started at 10 p.m. So the stand-up paddleboarding was really cool. And like smoke is coming off the Mirror Lake. It's, you know, morning. It's very quiet. That was incredible. And then the night hike was very challenging. The people who lead it are very into nature. They tell you, you know, I wore shoes. I'm not going to lie, but they say, you know, you don't have to wear shoes. They don't wear shoes. Really becoming one with nature at nighttime. You can have a headlamp, but they kind of suggest maybe you turn it off for most of the time. So you're really hiking in the complete darkness. You get to see like, what's the movie with the glowing plants? Avatar, I think, had the plants. Yep. Yeah, so those are real, apparently, and they were in the forest. And people in Latvia, at least what I've noticed when I was there, was they're very into nature. They know a lot about plants. So, like, all around us, they're like, this plant you put with this heals this. So that was really cool for me, learning about the different plants. And then we stopped at, like, 5 a.m. for a little picnic. By that point, I was like, oh, my goodness, I can't believe I'm, like, still alive right now. But it was really, really cool, honestly. I was so happy I did it. And then, like, less intense and something you can do during the day was you can take a train to Jurmala, which is the seaside. And nearby there's Kameri National Park, which I hiked.
We'll share all the Latvian stories on show notes, but just briefly, what can people expect when they jump onto your site?
So, yeah, my goal is to really show people, A, that they don't have to wait for a travel partner, but B, just from listening to especially women over the years, it's like they want to, A, travel confidently. You know, maybe there's some fears holding them back, and they want to travel more. So most of my content is related to solo female travel. And also at this point, I do share a lot of information about travel blogging. I feel like more and more it is a goal of like adding more travel to your life, and people are seeing more and more that it's possible. And I absolutely love that because I hope that my site is inspiring to people and empowering. So, yeah, that's what you can find.
We've had over 100,000 listens to our podcast episodes and thrilled you like it. But if you are a new subscriber, you may not have had a chance to listen to earlier episodes, like our very first one, Croatia, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, and you can see how we've improved. In that episode, we spoke with Annie.
Who
almost didn't travel to Croatia because the pics that she kept seeing on Instagram were all of sailing.
I pictured Greece. Is what I first thought. I was like, okay, there's lots of islands and things like that. And the history really surprised me. Like the historic buildings, the town's architecture is beautiful. Like, unlike anywhere else I've been, like there's like small streets with like stores each side, but everything's very clean. Mountains, beautiful nature. This surprised me a lot. Like, I didn't think it would be such a historic but natural place. It's like super cool place. I enjoyed it a lot.
I'll make it easy and put a link to that episode in show notes.
Too good. Plus, if you've enjoyed this episode on the Baltics, we'll also share some of our other World Nomad stories, including the one on the bog an amazing wilderness area in Estonia. Sounds terrible, but it reads fantastic. Look, it sounds like a brilliant place to go. And another reason why a nomad would love the Baltics.
Well, next week we explore Malaysia. In the meantime, you can get the World Nomads podcast on iTunes or download the Google Podcast app or ask Google Home or Alexa to play the World Nomads podcast.
See you later.
Bye.
The World Nomads Podcast. Explore your boundaries.